Big B here with Ironclad RC. Thank you guys for riding with me. Today we're going to be installing this 1/4 inch stuffing tube into this Delta Force 35 monohull RC boat. We'll be installing the Stinger along with it, and so just stay tuned. Thank you guys for joining me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Big B with Ironclad RC. So I'm running a .187 flex cable with a 3-inch 3/16 shaft. Okay. Now, to run this .187 flex cable with a Teflon liner, you're going to have to use a 9/32 brass tube. 9/32 with a Teflon liner. If you're going to run it without a Teflon liner, you have to use a 1/4 inch brass stuffing tube. Now, I'm running this boat with no liner. I have been running it with a liner, and I do not like it. I like to grease it. I like the way it's, you know, I like it with no liner. So we're going to do that today. We're going to install the 1/4 inch brass stuffing tube for the .187 flex cable. I'm running this low profile Stinger. It's a low profile. This is actually designed for catamarans. I don't know why I got it. I kind of like the way it looked. A little bit different. But it's really made for boats with overhang. Like my wife's pink boat, she has a little overhang on her boat. You see that overhang there? Back to the stuffing tube. So you don't want to make your bend in your stuffing tube too sharp. See this one right here? You see the kink in it? Even if it didn't have a kink, my opinion, that's a little bit too sharp of bend. You want a real gradual bend like this one here. A long, drawn out bend. This one's like a real short bend, and it's just too much. And it's gonna rub, you know, where it's real sharp at, where the bend's sharp. It's gonna rub like here, and then it's probably gonna rub up here. When you have a long bend like this, it distributes the pressure on the flex cable more, and you don't really have quite as many problems. So that's just a little words of wisdom from an experienced boater. Probably one of the most important parts of your boat build. So you drill your hole in the back of the boat, in the transom. Okay, want it dead straight with the keel of the boat. If you mess up and your boat and your motor is kind of to the left or to the right, maybe a couple millimeters, then you want to put the hole for your stuffing tube over to the left or over to the right, a couple of millimeters. You want it to be straight, dead straight. Your stuffing tube, you don't want it at an angle in there. You want it dead straight with the keel of the boat. Just drill your hole, put your stuffing tube in there, and see. Basically, you want to see what kind of bend you need. So my motor's real close, so I don't need a long stuffing tube. And what I do is I just kind of put a little bend in it, and I'll put my flex cable in the collet. And if it's not quite enough, I'll pull it out and put another little bend in my stuffing tube. I'll put it back in, and just kind of run your stuffing tube right up to the collet. You don't want it far away because it'll twist your flex cable when you got big props, or especially if you got big torquey motors. So you want it maybe, again, maybe 4 millimeters from the collet, about right there. And You want it dead in line. You want it to come, basically when you push this flex cable through, when you're done, you want it to slide right in the collet, no problems. Then you just epoxy everywhere, all over the place. We're going to put a bunch of epoxy in there, and it's best to use slow cure epoxy. Fast cure doesn't quite get into all the little crevices, nooks and crannies as a slow cure epoxy. I pretty much got mine bent to shape, and it's in line with the bottom of the boat. It's directly in line. You don't want it to run up, you know, pointing up. You don't want it to point down. You want it straight back out of the boat. Tube to go any farther in this style stinger than that line right there at the tip of my pointer. If you're running a Teflon liner, your Teflon liner would actually run all the way up into the stinger, as far up as you can get it to go. But you don't want your the brass stuffing tube to actually go into this stinger tube itself, because then you won't have any type of adjustability when it comes to tuning your boat. I'm going to mark where I need to cut my stuffing tube. I've got it pushed all the way up onto the collet. Give yourself a little bit of room for it to unscrew, and then put your stinger base up to your stuffing tube. I'm going to go ahead and mark it. So that's basically how far the stuffing tube is going to stick out the back of the boat. See that? What is that? Maybe a 1/4 inch. So we're going to cut it off. And the way I cut my stuffing tube is with this little pipe cutter. You just kind of put it on there, tighten it up, and spin it at the same time. I always cut a little extra off and then I file the rest down. Rough up this thing. Get a piece of sandpaper, like 80 grit, and just rough it up pretty good. That way you have a good rough surface for the epoxy to stick to. I've already sanded everything out of here from my old one. And we're going to go ahead and mix up some epoxy and start the process. And then I go ahead and put my stuffing tube, my flex cable in the stuffing tube. This is your last chance to do any kind of adjustments or anything. Check your work, check it twice. So I'm going to get this all spread out real quick, and then we'll start doing some fine-tune adjustments once we get this epoxy in and it starts to kick off. I usually use 5-minute epoxy my first go around, because I like to set it up and get it in place rather quickly. I don't want to mess about with it. I'm just going to do it in the middle, and then I'll do, once this kind of cures and I get it all set up right, I'll do the back where it goes through the transom with some 24-hour epoxy. I want it to be in line this way too. You don't want it pointing down, facing down or up. Everything lined up properly. It can be a little bit deceiving at times. I always wipe my boat down like 1,000 times. Anytime I work on it, messing with, any type of adhesives. I wipe this bad boy down like 400 times a day. The flex cable mounted up to the collet, and we got the stuffing tube all lined up using the flex cable. Then I put epoxy in. It's kind of hard for you to see. Let's see. See the epoxy there? I didn't get it up in the transom yet. I just wanted to get the tube like fastened down, and then tomorrow I'll probably put some 24-hour epoxy back here in the transom hole. That way it'll have time to seep down into every little nook and cranny, and we won't have any type of leaks at all. So I got it all lined up pretty good. So we're gonna wait for that to dry up, and then we'll come back and put some more epoxy on. All right. 24-hour epoxy in the back here on this stuffing tube, and all I'm going to do is I really just want to seal up this hole right here. So off camera, I've actually used some 24-hour slow cure epoxy that I poured in to our stuffing tube. I poured it all over, especially where it's going in through the transom. That's the most important part. You want a watertight seal back here. And I like to use slow cure because it doesn't cure immediately. It gives you time to work with it, and it actually will seep into all the little voids, cracks, and crevices in the transom itself, and giving you a nice tight waterproof bond. So our next step is to trim up the access stuffing tube on the transom itself. I'll take a file and just start filing on it without the shaft in, and then I'll put the housing up to the transom, and if it needs a little more taken off, I'll file it off and just kind of go from there with it. So we're going to get started on that right now. Sand around where the base is going to sit. That way you can get any old dirt. You basically have a nice mounting surface for your adhesive to adhere to. So it's all sanded down. We got a nice flat mounting surface for the stinger base. No gaps. And now we're going to use the Loctite Marine adhesive sealant. We're going to glob it on there and put our hardware in and make sure that we have movement with the strut. I'm going to cape it on there good. We don't want a leak. Well, I tried to get you a better angle, but I've got this little shorty flex driver with a nut driver on the end. I'm going to put on for my nuts. So I had to actually get my Dremel and Dremel out where the screws are coming through the hole. You see my screw there? It was too tight to get a big washer in, and I didn't want to use a little washer. So basically, we've got to cut the shaft to size. It's way too long. And I have my grub screw flat spot here where the drive dog goes. And I've got to get a measurement to make my cut. So I use this adjustable ruler, and I put it up to the end of my stinger and mark where my drive dog's going to go. So that's exactly where my drive dog will be. So I'm going to leave it a little bit long so I have some room to play with. Put it on the end of your shaft where the collet goes, and you'll take your marker and mark where you need to cut it off at. And I'm going to use a cut-off wheel to cut the flex cable. Now you just want to make sure that you don't use like a hacksaw or something. You want to kind of cut this fast so it doesn't unravel and burr on you. I'm going to cut it a little long. The bench grinder here, and I just kind of grind like a bevel on the end. So I've got the thrust washer on. I got the drive dog on. I got my little gap in between the stinger and the drive dog. Now we can put the propeller on. Now we got the prop on. I like to use a little spacer in between my prop and my nut. That way I don't have to drive this nut all the way down. Just saves time when you're changing propellers. Because I have a couple of big propellers I run on here too, so I have to run my drive dog up a little bit on my shaft. But I use Grim Racer speed grease. Got it from Offshore Electrics. It's pretty good stuff. So the best way I found to grease the flex shaft, stinger, stuffing tube is to put your grease in a syringe and basically just inject it into the stinger. Alright, should be good. And then I just kind of spin it as I put it in the stuffing tube. As I'm spinning it, I hold the paper towel right here, right at the end of my stuffing tube. Right there, to catch all the grease, try to keep the grease in the stuffing tube itself. You don't want the grease coming out. You know, you want to try to keep as much in there as you possibly can. Have some excess come out. It's inevitable. And just spin it as you're putting it in your stinger. Move it back and forth. Get that grease everywhere. Alright. So we're going to get this cleaned up. And then we're going to hook the collet up. And just give the motor a little spin up and see how she acts. Just kind of listen past this. You hear that bearing? I'm pretty sure it's starting to go bad. Sounds good. See how much excess grease we got thrown everywhere. Sounds good, y'all. Then now you want to check for heat. Just kind of spin it up. Be careful for the propeller. And just see if you have much heat in your stuffing tube or stinger. Feels pretty good. No heat there. I think that's it, you guys. I think that's it. Pretty sure we have finished our project. That is how you install a stuffing tube. So you want to Loctite your drive dog in. You also want to Loctite your prop nut on. Sometimes I Loctite this collet. I use blue Loctite on the collet. That way it doesn't back off mid-run. We just installed the turn fins. The next video we'll probably be doing some testing. We're going to tinker test and tune this thing. See if we can't get a little bit better performance and handling out of it. I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you for joining me. I know it was a long video, but at least we learned something. We'll see you next time. Big B with Ironclad RC. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for riding with me. I also wanted to throw in there, if you're running a 1/4 inch stuffing tube in your boat, you can run a .150 flex cable with a liner in a 1/4 inch stuffing tube. So you can run a .187 size shaft, flex shaft, or a .150 flex shaft in your 1/4 inch stuffing tube.